Okay, we are back at it. Um, Today, the project that I'm working on is I'm still in chapter 9. Yeah, it was, I don't know, 2 months ago was the last time I worked on this. I got through a particularly long section, and I was pretty confident I was going to finish after, but then just life, other things. I never got back to the project. So I'm still editing chapter 9. My goal for today is I want to get chapter 9 finished. I ran across one audio file that was incomplete, so I've been correcting that. I want you to meet a friend of mine. And that looks like that's pretty well corrected. And let's see here. I need to pick back up. Looks like I have 8 more to prepare before I could start piecing this together. And piecing it together is actually kind of a lot harder. It's a much harder portion. Here, let me put this over here. Much harder portion of the project because then I need to start to edit the cadence and make sure that things fit together. Right now, this is a relatively easy part. This is the same as what I was doing before. I'm just opening the files. I am normalizing them basically so I can hear them. And then I'm editing out any of the silent parts instead of leaving any kind of breathing or whatever in there. I am changing it to silence. I've started doing this where I do fade ins and fade outs to try to avoid any kind of clicking or anything like that. So it looks like I have a little bit of an issue here with where my audio is being sent. So I've got to make an adjustment. I want everything to go into my headphones, which is what it should be doing, but it is selecting. It's selecting my speakers instead. So I guess I can just force it. See if that works. No, didn't do anything. So that's weird. I guess maybe it's in the settings here. So let's go ahead and let's put this back to default so we don't have some weird outlier. Playback, yeah. So I have the playback. Can't talk. I have the playback in the program set incorrectly. I don't see a default here, so I'm just going to select my headphones and get that fixed. Meet Messeth, Mage of Dour Good Jest. Meet Messeth, Mage of Dour Good Jest. So in this one, like, there's a silence here, but I don't hear anything going on in that silence. This is normalized pretty much as high as I'd like to go. I'm still gonna silence it. Meet Messeth, Mage of Dour Good Jest. Just in case, right? Like, I feel like sometimes when you're working on a project like this, you may be really confident that there's nothing there, there's no problem, and then somebody else will hear it or something like that, and then the problem's just there, and you didn't do anything about it. So better safe than sorry, I think, is the approach there. But anyway, so that one's cleaned up, and we'll move on to the next one. And the other thing that I wanted to talk about is I wanted to keep talking about AI. And I suppose me talking about it is probably more of a justification than anything. I have some level of discomfort with AI tools. I tend to be sympathetic to viewpoints that say that, like, AI is ruining some of the
Well, I couldn't just let her sit there.
creativity.
Well, I couldn't just let her sit there and stare at the walls all day.
Um, I mean, certainly there's examples where AI is going to vastly improve what you're doing. Like even what I'm doing right now, I'm choosing not to use AI.
The walls all day.
Um, but like as a system, AI could speed up a lot of what I'm doing. Like you see me clicking on menus manually and kind of just going through this by hand, as it were. Like the computer itself is already automating a lot of parts, and AI is more or less just another extension of that. I think that is a way of thinking of it. I think it doesn't take too long being online looking at some of the things that AI generates for you to come to the conclusion that like, well, AI isn't necessarily great. Like, and I think, AI itself is a bit of a misnomer.
I thought you would be excited to. I thought you would be excited to meet a mage.
Because artificial intelligence as we know it today and as people talk about it today it's not really intelligence. It's not really. Um, it is artificial, but it's not intelligently doing something. It is filtering things in a way that appears to be intelligent.
I thought you would be excited to.
Now, here's something I don't like that happens: is like I don't hear.
I thought you would be excited to meet a mage.
It takes it a minute for me to hear it, so that's a little annoying. But we're just going to move forward. I wanted to put it through the headphones so that I could hear it more clearly, but obviously, Bluetooth headphones introduce their own limitations. Um, so what is it that I actually have to say about AI that's worth talking about? Um, I think in the artist community, there's a lot of um, vitriol directed at using AI because I think a lot of artists have been um, the beneficiaries of maybe the most
Tiny but strong. Tiny but strong.
mm, one of the most beneficial periods of time towards artistry, like never before that I'm aware of. Has being an artist been so profitable, so viable, um, so well regarded? I think even in my youth, it was less than it is now. But there are a lot of people who have grown up in a time where being an artist is like it's a legitimate career path. Like it's not a ridiculous thing to aim at.
She could defeat you. She could defeat you as easily as swatting a bug.
Okay. I think, certainly when my dad was growing up, being an artist was it was something you could chase. But kind of like from the stories that he's told me, it kind of in a rebellious way, it was something that you could chase. Like you could say to your parents, "Well, I want to be an artist," but they would more or less scoff at you and heavily recommend against it because even as recently as that, like the idea of going out and doing art was kind of like the idea of I'm going to become a famous actor. It's like, well, okay, you could. Like there are famous actors and actresses. That's a thing. But the likelihood of you succeeding at that is very low. There's a lot of people in the world, and there's a lot of people who are better than you at a lot of things. So it is with some audacity that you would say. You see, Audacity, that's the title of the program I'm using.
Her name is Messeth.
I worked it in there. It was with some audacity that you would say, I'm going to be an artist, right? And it would take some very, very hard work to pull it off. Like this, you weren't signing up for an easy life by any means. I know, and my dad's story is not mine to tell. And because it's not mine to tell, I would get some of the details wrong. But I do remember from what he said that his parents were very opposed. Well, his dad in particular, very opposed to his decision to pursue art. And that ended up resulting in him losing his financial support from his dad.
She grew up in the temple at Mount Isterray, and she wants to know.
Okay, there was like a little breath there. I want to see if I can get rid of that. Because I, like so many other people, do need to breathe. So sometimes you can hear it. And while I think people are generally going to be charitable about that, I don't want it in there if I can help it.
She grew up in the temple at Mount Isterray, and she wants to know why I...
Yeah, got it. Got it. Let me see. I'm zoomed too far in to like find my place, right? But too far out to select the audio very well. This is just a struggle. I have said this many times before, and I'll say it again. Somebody who actually knows what they're doing is undoubtedly going to have a way to get around a lot of the struggles that I have.
At Mount Isterray, and she wants to know why I would be named after the famous evil...
Okay, another breath in here. Let's get rid of that. Okay, so what was I talking about? Oops. So in a way, like, there was some of that, some of that lingered when I was growing up and when I was being raised and trained by my dad, where he was like, I don't want to teach my kids like my dad taught me that art is not a good idea.
She grew up in the temple at Mount Isterray, and she wants to know why I would be named after the famous evil Tial.
Okay, much better. All right, that one's done. I don't want my kids to grow up and feel like art isn't worth their time and attention. But by the same token, my dad, he was raised by his dad, and his dad was the father figure. And so my dad just naturally, he values the same things that his dad valued. And one of those things is utility. So even though I think philosophically my dad might proclaim otherwise, he might say, art does not have to be utilitarian. Of course, you can do art for art's sake. I think in practice, he still very much retains that feeling.
You tell me every time I come here.
And some of the utility that I think his dad was worried about is if you're an artist, then you're not going to be earning money. Because everybody needs money to survive, and this is kind of how I'm bringing it back to my main point. I think now in this day and age,
Why are you following me?
There is more opportunity to earn money off of artistry than there ever has been, just ever. Um, and again, I could be overstating it. Maybe there were times where the opportunity was more and better. I don't think that's true. I think generally speaking, at least for
Why are you following? Why are you following me?
at least for quite some time, um, hmm, what is this? I have maybe two different sections. I have two different sections. I think that I'm working on here in chapter 10. I want to get this point out, so that's why I haven't moved into piecing the chapter together yet, because I think piecing the audio together is going to require a little more focus and attention. And you could tell already that I'm struggling to get my thoughts out while even doing this simple task. Um, so I think like doing this helps me develop that skill, but also it's a little awkward, and I don't want it to be awkward. I want it to be as smooth as possible. So I just kind of went forward into doing the basic edits on some more files.
Why do you Why do you think I defeated the demon? I simply said the demon does not exist.
Hmm.
Why?
There's a lot of lag there for me between hearing the sound and the play bar showing where it's at. So that can make it difficult to identify like where edits need to be made, but I think we can still figure it out.
I simply said the demon does not exist.
Okay. I think that's good. That's good edit. So I guess I'm kind of circling this one point because I'm making it in the blind, right? Like I want to contend that we're all wealthier today than at any point in recent history, and that it is easier to make a living as an artist today than it has ever been before. But I don't know that I can make that point. Like, I could be wrong. So I just got to back off of that point. But the reason why I want to make that point is because I want to point out that, for myself to some extent and for my kids, we've grown up in a time where being an artist is something that you could reasonably expect would work out for you. Like if you pursued it, if you found the right path to walk down in doing your art, you could make a living off of it.
I think you have assumed too much.
And certainly that has been true in my lifetime. Like I've seen a lot of people sort of go down this path of being an artist, and not necessarily people who are what I would say, sort of traditionally tormented by their artistry, like the kind of people who they dwell on it. It resides in their head, whether because it's of their giftedness or it's a preoccupation of theirs. It won't leave them alone. Like they need to express themselves. These are the kinds of people that I'm thinking of when I say like something like a true artist or something like that. But in my lifetime, you don't have to be that person. You don't have to be the person who's tormented by a need to express some kind of inner vision in order to be considered an artist and in order to make a living as an artist. In fact, I think that there are many scenarios you could point to where people were actually better off being an artist than they would have been doing other things. And so they may have chosen to pursue that path just because it was financially beneficial as opposed to fulfilling some kind of inner need.
I already told you I would not talk about it.
Okay, that sounds good. Um, and I think that that is a reasonable approach to making art. Like, there are two sides to making art, and not everybody is excited to recognize both sides. So on the one hand, try to get my hand in the frame. On the one hand, you have your vision, um, and the idea that's in your head, and sort of all of the pieces that would be um, you, normally tied to this concept of like a tortured artist. You have something inside that you want to share, you want to express to other people. Um, that is part of artistry, and that part is where the whole idea of art doesn't need to serve a purpose. It doesn't need to have utility. Like, it is okay, it is even good to express yourself for the sake of expressing yourself. That's where that idea comes from, is from this, like, inner vision that you want to get out. And then the other part of art is the actual skill and utility of art. So there are lots of artists who are famous and celebrated who have a particular skill set, but they don't have another skill set that another celebrated artist might have. Like, you might have a welder who's a celebrated artist, and then you might have a painter who's a celebrated artist. Well, the welder may not be able to paint, and the painter may not be able to weld, and yet both are considered artists because they have the technical proficiency in what they're doing. Like, they have a skill set that they are using to express a vision, whether it's a vision that comes from the core of their being, or whether it's a vision that they've acquired by developing the skill of reading into other people's expectations, because that's certainly a way to make art, or whether it's a vision that they've created by, instead of approaching it as this tortured artist vision, whatever, they just develop the skill of building a design based on what they've learned makes a good design. So they have a skill set that allows them to create art that people can look at and enjoy and appreciate. And our ability to appreciate art is wildly different. Like, art can speak to us, it can amplify feelings within us, it can resonate with experiences that we have, or it can just look nice. That's great too. It could just be beautiful. Um, that's a thing. It's fine for art to just be beautiful. Maybe it doesn't evoke any emotions at all. Maybe it's just nice to look at. That's good. That's good art. So there's a wide range in when you express what art is, and I think that it is in this range that the argument for and against AI becomes confusing, because I think a lot of people have identified a career path where they've been able to make money and support themselves as artists because of skill and technical proficiency in doing things. And I think that that is to be respected. I think you should respect somebody's skill, somebody's ability to put together a piece that looks nice or evokes a feeling, their technical proficiency in being able to put their vision onto a medium, whatever the medium might be, and express it to other people, whether it's through voice acting or painting or drawing or welding or sculpting, or singing or reading or writing. All of this is artistic. Um, So one of the biggest objections to AI that is popular at the moment is that it comes from a soulless machine. So it has no heart to it. There is no tortured artist vision involved. What the machine is doing is it's collating the vision that other people have put out there and creating something that emulates that. So it's entirely skill based. It has there's no I don't know, talent or vision behind it. It's just a skill thing. And so I think people who have spent years of their life developing skill sets that allows them to take a vision from inside and put it outside for other people to look at and judge and experience. Um, they are rightly annoyed that AI could come in and replicate what they're doing to any degree. Like, I think to a small degree is annoying, to a large degree, equally annoying. I'm not so sold that it's more annoying, but maybe it is. Maybe it is. And it feels threatening too, because it's starting to erode the ability that people have to develop a skill and then sell the skill. And I think it's starting to erode that because it's meant to erode that. And I don't know how else to put it other than to put it in terms of like my own experience with AI. So I started drawing very young. I enjoyed drawing, and part of the reason why I enjoyed it is because I have always had vision in my, I've always had something inside that I want to express, or that I, to some extent, feel a need to express. That very much describes me. Um, and like I'm struck by this sudden need that I have to like justify why this describes me. But give me a moment. Let me just set that aside. That's who I am as a person. So as a teenager, as a preteen and a teenager, I spent a lot of time drawing. I spent a lot of time exploring how to make art. The primary medium that I had access to was paper and colored pencils. I grew up in a poor household. Um, my father was an amazing artist who used many different mediums, who has a deep and profound understanding of how to create art. But also, he has scars from his journey as an artist. He has demons, I guess, that he has wrestled with that relate directly to his experience as an artist. And I say that only to say that as I was growing up, I knew my dad knew art backwards and forwards, but I also observed that my dad does not create art. Generally, as a rule, there have been moments in his life that I don't need to get into where he has kind of gone back and started doing that again, but then he's turned it off. And he has pursued other things in life that bring him joy and satisfaction and help him grow closer in his relationship with the Lord. But, art is something that he shut down. He's very talented, he's very skilled, and he purposefully turned away from it and has not pursued it. And so I say all of that because I have a need to absolve him. Like, it's not his fault that all I had was colored pencils and paper. He did the best he could to provide the best that he could for the family. And I think, there's a tendency for people on the outside looking in to look at that and go, well, if he had made different choices, he could have provided better. He could have been more of a winner, and you could have had more stuff. And certainly that's an easy judgment to make. And I think, yeah, sure, you could identify opportunities where he could make different decisions. But just having more stuff and having more resources is not really what life is about, and it's not really what building a family is about. I think anybody who is married, who has kids, who is building a family, or who has experienced building a family, could pretty easily understand that not all of your decisions are about what is maximally profitable in terms of money. Like that's a piece of the equation, but it's not all of it. So again, I'm just saying all of that to absolve him from any responsibility for this limitation. The limitation that I experienced growing up, which was just I had colored pencils and I had paper and I did what I could with them, but I didn't have a lot of direction, and I didn't pursue a lot of direction in how to improve what I was doing. And I reached a certain point where I was working a full-time job and I was doing school and I was thinking about what my future would look like. And I just kind of reached a point where I stopped pursuing, I just stopped drawing. I stopped doing any kind of artwork at all, partially because my interests moved elsewhere, and partially because I was frustrated that I couldn't create on the page the image that was in my head, like the style that I wanted. And that's really the foundational point I want to start from, is that somewhere in my teenage years, I realized that I couldn't create what I wanted to create when I was making art. I could create art that I was proud of, but it didn't look like what I wanted. And I saw potential in computers for helping with that, because one of the things that I really sort of longed for was, like, when I would color, say, a jacket on the page, there was all kinds of variation in the color, which can be really good. Like if you're shading, showing wrinkles and lines and things like that, of course. But also, like, there were portions of what I would color that I really wanted it to be a smooth and consistent color. And what I longed for was the ability to make that happen. I couldn't do it with colored pencil. And I didn't really know where to turn to make it happen. And so I kind of, I experimented with some programs. This is old stuff, but like Print Shop. The computer that I had was a computer that I bought, I don't know, maybe 15, 16 years old, maybe younger than that. It was an Apple IIe. And so that was the computer that I had all the way until I went to college. And when I was in college, I built my first computer, my first x86 computer, I guess it was. But when I was growing up, like, I was aware of like the 386 and the cool things that people were doing with it. I had an older brother who had, a computer like that, and I could see, like, he would bring up a JPEG on the screen, and I would just be blown away by the resolution and the detail. And so I had some thoughts about, like, okay, well, the computer could help me to achieve, the smoothness of color when I want smoothness of color and the shading when I want shading. But it looks like it's pretty expensive to put this system together that's going to allow me to do it. So in any case, it just wasn't something that I pursued, and I went off to college and I built a computer. But the computer that I built at college, I used more for doing my college work and playing games. That was the primary usage that I had for that computer. And I did have some thoughts about, like, well, how could I use this for artistry? Those thoughts were there. But again, even at that time, it was really expensive to do that. And I tried, like, drawing on the screen with a mouse, and that just didn't work. Like, the coordination between hand and eye didn't work out in that way for me with the computer. And so I pretty quickly came to the realization, well, I really kind of need, like, some kind of a tablet with some kind of like a drawing pen that's specifically intended for the computer. That's what I would need to be able to utilize this technology. And in that time, so we're talking about like 1999, 2000, my recollection is that technology didn't really exist that much, and where it did exist, it was extremely expensive. So forward a few more years, we get into, I was working on movies. I was looking at the editing suites that the company had, and they had some like Cintiqs from Wacom, where people were able to just, hand draw things, do effects with effectively with a pen. And that looked very like, I was excited about that, but still, even in that time, like I think the Cintiq was like $15,000 or something. I could be wrong. No offense to Wacom on that. It was still priced out of my price range. So all of this to say that it wasn't until relatively recently that, and this was prompted by one of my brothers who came to me and said, "Hey, have you considered using AI?" Um, Now, at the time, I was already trying to use AI. I was using an online service, and I paid like an obscene amount of money to get access to its AI text to AI image generator because I was curious, and I had at that time I had run into a problem. I and this is kind of another tangent. Pardon me. Back in, I don't know, 2018, 2017, somewhere in there, we were on vacation, and I was reading this article, and somebody had posted an article about how they were making playing cards and how they had developed a system of hand making playing cards that were very similar to like your standard bicycle cards that you would buy in the store. And that was very exciting to me. I really wanted to be able to do that. So I studied this guy's system. I got all the pieces that I would need, and I started making playing cards myself. And that kind of led me to the idea that, well, what I would really like to do is I would like to, excuse me, I would like to have some playing cards to make. Like I don't want to just make random cards. Like I want to make something. Um, and so I started developing a game that I could make playing cards specifically for that game. I kind of went through a lot of iterations of that. Let's see here. Until I got down to my own set. Now, there were a few pieces of this that were challenging. Like there's like a border piece of artwork here. I was using somebody else's art for that. The way that I pieced this together was more as a designer. Like I collected different pieces of artwork online that I really liked, and then I pieced them together into cards that described characters, and I chose to use characters from my story ultimately, that describe them. So I developed specific traits that would be relevant to the character from the story, and I developed a system of actions and reactions. Um, and I had, like a little health bubble and a little basic attack value bubble, and then I had to, basically I had to scrap the artwork that I was using because it wasn't mine. I had cribbed it from somebody else. So I had to throw it out, and I had to make something myself. So I did that part, and then the same with like the title bar. It was very different. I had to figure out, well, what should mine look like? What would I be happy with? How can I develop it on my own? The icons, every little piece of making this card I had to make. And the last part of this process was the actual artwork for the characters. And so what I had done when did like the first and second draft of the story is I had gone online and I had found artwork that other people had done that looked visually impressive to me, and also looked similar to the character that I had envisioned. And so I took that artwork and I used it for the cards. Well, obviously, if I wanted to like sell this card game or really call it my own, I would need to have my own artwork. Well, at that point in my life, I didn't feel confident in my ability to like draw a character for myself. Like I knew I could do it, but it wouldn't look like what I wanted. And so I was using an AI art generator. Um, like this card is a good example. I would do, I think this one, I don't remember how many, a few hundred, maybe like 500 or something renders that I did, um, of different prompts, to try to get to this character. And you could tell this is AI art. Like there's a lot of undefined details. Like what are these little black things really? We don't know. Where does this fur or feather or whatever is in his cap, where does that actually start? We don't really know. It all just kind of mushes together here. There are some bits like this is a famous, I think, AI thing. There's like 1,500 belts here, and all of them begin and end pretty randomly. They don't necessarily connect. Um, I actually think this artwork works on a lot of levels, which is why I've kept it. Um, but I liked it. I liked it, and I picked this one out of hundreds of renders. And even in picking this one out, there were some things that I didn't like. Like his face was super wonky. There were like patterns that I had to turn into skin, and like even over here, this brow. If you look really closely, uh, there's like a hint of an eyebrow here, but there's nothing really defining an eyebrow, at least not like over here. I think you should see more. So there's still some things about this that are very AI, like why is this all grainy and pixelated when this is not? Well, obviously this is less so because I, like I manually fixed it. But overall, I love the artwork, and I loved it enough that I've continued to keep it. And so that's kind of my starting point with using AI. I was like, okay, well, I have to make artwork for myself. I can't hire. So actually, my starting point actually was I started looking around for artists who could make, better artwork, who could do it for me for free. Which is not a compelling argument to bring to anybody, particularly if they ask you any amount of questions and then they discover, oh, you're planning to use my artwork to make money for yourself maybe someday. Okay. Um, it's not a great sell. It can strain a friendship to make that kind of request. And I rightly felt awkward asking people to do this, but I feel like I could do it for myself. And I knew I needed artwork that I could use that actually belonged to me. And that's kind of, then AI stepped in, and I was like, okay, well, I could render my characters. I could do hundreds of AI prompts until it outputs something that resembles my character enough that I can, I can use it. And I think that was a good plan. Let me be clear. I if somebody else out there is doing the same thing, like I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Now, I think it can be sloppily done. Like even this, like there's some sloppiness to this, right? Like you could see that there's some ambiguous details, and you look at some AI art and you look at it, the moment you look at it, you're like, oh, that's fantastic, that's beautiful. But then the longer you look at it, you're like, wait, does he have 6 fingers? Where does this belt go? What is this light source? There's a lot of questions. And that was a lot of the frustration that I was running into rendering AI art for my cards. And so one of the approaches that I took was I started to draw, like a crude drawing of the character, and then use that as a source for the AI to try to get the AI to do what I wanted. And then even here, like the hands they're almost there, but they're not. Like if you could see more of the picture, they're not clearly defined. So I just kind of cut it off of the picture. But this is based on something that I drew. And then I did renders until I found one that I liked, and then I edited it to look more like the character. But even in that, I was having a lot of trouble getting the AI to render sort of exactly what I was looking for. So this is not the first. Here, I'll bring up the first one. So this is the first one that I did where I had a very specific picture that I had chosen for Messeth as a character that I wanted to use. In fact, you can see like I'm wearing my Messeth t-shirt that my wife made for me. It's awesome. So I had a very specific image and I had a very clear vision of what this character was going to be like. And when I was making AI renders, I couldn't get anything that really looked like what I wanted. And so what I ended up doing was I took an AI render that was close, and I used the process that you've seen me use over and over again as I've recorded these Workday streams in order to draw it and then work on coloring it. And this was my first time that I experimented really with coloring on the computer and shading, and I'm obviously I was very proud and very happy with how it turned out. Now, of course, as you're looking at this, there's some things, right? Like this could use a redraw, no doubt. Like her nose is a little funky, needs a little help. What is this belt actually doing? That's another good question. I didn't have the confidence. This is the first time I tried this process out. I didn't have the confidence to make a ton of changes from the AI artwork. Like I looked at the AI artwork and I was like, I know that looks good. It has a few things that need to be fixed, but I'm looking at it, I know that it looks good, and I had low enough confidence. I was just like, okay, I just have to replicate what I see. That's the only way this is going to work. And I think the further I've been able to move away from the shackles of that, I think the better my work has gotten. So then I did, this was the second one that I did, and I thought it turned out even better. Let's see here. And then I did this one, which again, I thought was even better. I challenged myself with trying to figure out how to do some kind of lightning effect. That's what I came up with. Maybe it's not the best. I rather like it. I think it's pretty good. This was another one that I rendered. This is AI art here, but I rendered this from a sketch of the character. This is also rendered from a sketch of the character. And I actually really liked this. I did not have, at the time that I did this, I had no confidence that I could replicate these kind of metallic details. Like I thought I wouldn't be able to color this and have it look this good, so I stuck with the render. I think this red part here looks a little funky. This should just be solid belt, but I decided, hey, I'm just going to overlook that. I'm happy with this. I had to do some correcting on his eyes. They looked really funky in the render. But I really liked the way that the metal and the wood looked, and I really liked what the computer spat out. So I stuck with it. And I'm fine with that. Like I think this is a decent card. I'm fine with it. I'm proud of it even. Like I'm happy to have this as part of my set. This was the last character card that I did out of this set. This set had 12 character cards. This was the last one that I worked on, and I think that it actually shows like it's the best of the ones that I did, and I think the shading has come a long way. I really wanted this to look like a flannel tartan. I don't think that it really came across that well, but I'm still proud of it. I'm still more or less happy with where I got it to. This was the second to last one I did, and I think this is maybe the best. The only thing that's really bad about this picture, in my opinion, is all of the circles that I did down here. They're all different sizes. I freehanded them, and I didn't go back to correct them later, which is something that I've learned, like, absolutely, you can go back and you can correct things later. I really wanted these details to be like metal banding, and I don't think that I quite got there. I think I got close, but I'm not quite there yet. But overall, with this one, I'm really happy with how it turned out. This is the first time. This one is the first time that I tried to do metallic details. Now, this one is based on a piece of artwork that I really loved for this character, and I really had a hard time letting it go. It wasn't my artwork. I don't own it. I don't have permission to use it. It was somebody else's work, and man, they did a fantastic job. And they did such a fantastic job that I loved what they did, and I really had a hard time letting it go. Um, so this was the render that I did based on their artwork, and I'm really happy with how it turned out, and I'm really proud of how I was able to do the art. And this is the first time that I tackled doing any kind of metallic color, and so I really went at it slowly and methodically, and I read a lot of articles about how you're supposed to set up your color values and stuff, and it's not perfect. You know, you can definitely find better work out there, of course, but I'm very proud of how this turned out, and it started to help me to feel like, okay, maybe I can do metallic things, metallic pieces. This is actually an AI render. So I did a portrait of well, I found artwork of a face that I thought suited this character really well. And then I did like a sketch based on that portrait. And my intention was to kind of get to this place with that sketch. But again, there was a skill gap there. And so I became frustrated in the process. Um, and at the time, it really just felt like it was taking too much time. Like I was working on this thing all the time. I investing hundreds of hours into it, and it wasn't turning out like what I wanted. So this is AI, and perhaps obviously so. Like some of the wrinkles in his face maybe don't reflect reality very well. Um, but I really liked it. This is pretty similar to what I had in my head for the facial sketch that I was trying to do, but I wasn't able to get it. I wasn't able to get it to work at this level. Now, at this point, I look at this one and I'm happy with it. Like I would be proud of this as card art, but I also in the back of my head think, well, maybe I should take another stab at drawing this by hand. Maybe that would be a good use of time. And then that brings us to Pinmay, who we've already seen. So, all of that to say, that is to describe my journey with AI and how I came to the conclusions that I came to. And while I do have sympathy for the fact that there are people who have developed skills, who have developed careers surrounding their skills, who are being affected by the rise of AI and the way people are using it. And while I do also agree that the way that people are using AI is kind of inherently dangerous, like there's some badness in my estimation. Um, like I think of students who are just using AI to answer questions for them without learning anything, and I think, on the one hand, great, use the tools that you have, but on the other hand, I think, yes, we are losing some of the ability to process things and to memorize things and remember things. I think rote memorization is actually important, both to the human experience and to your ability to just learn. Um, and so I do think that there's a danger, like we're seeing a degradation in people's ability to think and analyze and empathize and find solutions and use syllogistic reasoning. I think all of that is being weakened to some degree by a reliance on AI, and I do think that that's dangerous and it's bad. So I don't necessarily want to just roll in with an argument of like AI is fine, it's just a tool. But that does bring up the it's just a tool point, which is like, there were men who drove rivets for the classic, what is it, Paul Bunyan story. Maybe I'm getting that wrong, but you know, the people who worked the sledgehammers, and these were hard men who were strong and who had a specific skill, and who could work quickly. And then somebody, you know, developed a steam powered rivet driver, I guess. I'm just going to lean really hard into the story. And it worked faster than any of these men. And so they all ended up without a job. And, you know, bad for them, but good for everybody in a general sense. And so that's a hard balance to strike. But I do think it's an applicable example in the situation of AI. It is bad for specific individuals, and it is bad for people who have made a living doing something, and it might even be bad overall for artists in general, for people who are actually tormented by a vision that they have inside that they need to get out. This might be terrible for them, for us, because it might rob our culture of valuing that enough that people can make a living doing that. That might be just the way that it is. Because not everybody who makes art is expressing an inner vision, and not every piece of art is, you know, even if it was made from beginning to end by a human being with feelings who was trying to pour their soul into it, that doesn't mean that every piece of art is important. You know, at the end of the day, if you can't make a living doing it, then you're going to quickly find out who the people are who have a need to do it. You know, who the people are who, regardless of whether or not they're going to be rewarded in any way for expressing themselves, will still express themselves because they have to, because it comes from somewhere deep inside, and it reflects a deep need that they have. And I'm not in favor of that future, just for the record, as somebody who has more or less lived that out. Like, I've always had this need to express these ideas inside, and I've never been financially rewarded for doing so. And I've wallowed in discouragement because of that, and at times refused to pursue my vision. Because, you know, why bother? I'm not going to get any money. And I've had to wrestle with, is it about the money, or is it about doing it? And what does this mean for me as a person? And how do I deal with this in terms of being a provider, and raising a family, and interacting with my community, and having a positive impact on life around me? And I think, you know, I've had to, as I've grown older, I've had to abandon the idea that it's okay for me to just be depressed about how things didn't work out for me. Like, I feel very justified in that, right? Because things didn't work out for me in the way that I wanted them to. But also giving myself permission to live out that disappointment is really very narcissistic, right? It's very self-serving. It doesn't help my kids. It doesn't help my wife. It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't even help me. It's not helping me. It's just serving me. It's just serving my disappointment. We call it self-pity. But I think what I would recognize is that it's just useless. And it's okay to feel that way and behave that way sometimes, but that can't be your legacy at the end of the day. And so in the conclusion of it, for me, regardless of whether there's an opportunity to make money or not, and certainly I'm going to continue trying to make money, but regardless of whether that happens or not, like, there is a need that I am living out, where I need to express these ideas, and I need to find a way to do it. And, you know, part of that for me, and maybe in a healthy way, has involved using AI to advance what I'm capable of doing beyond just colored pencil on paper to something that more closely resembles the vision that I have in my head, but using AI to inform the decisions that I make in creating that artwork. And that does feel bad. And I think there's a lot of people who would look at, watch my process from beginning to end, and who would say, you're not an artist. What you're doing does not take skill. And to that I would say, you're right. You're absolutely right. What I'm doing does not take as much skill as what many other artists do. It doesn't. There's no arguing it. AI made the fruit low hanging enough that I could get to it from where I am, and that has been hugely beneficial for me. But I completely understand and can sympathize with another artist who has spent their life training in a skill set that I'm now replicating, but without any of the work. It's more or less just been handed to me by AI. And so now I can do it, easily, and without the blood, sweat, tears, and effort that this other person had to put into it. And I think there's an argument to be made that I get to do it because some of their blood, sweat, and tears, and some of the people in their position who have invested themselves into doing this have been exploited to a certain degree by the large language model, aggregating this information. But I think it's too simplistic to look at this and say, well, it's just all automatically bad. I think this maybe this is the worst possible note to end on, but I think that some people get exploited, and it helps everybody. The person getting exploited, what that exploitation accomplishes is for the benefit of everybody. Now, does that make the exploitation okay? Certainly not. Absolutely not. But I also don't want to rob them of what they've done. Is it, I don't know, I could be saying this in the dumbest, worst way possible, but the kids who, I don't know anything personally about this, but this is what I've been told, that, the phone manufacturers, they use dubious labor practices to accomplish what they're accomplishing. Like, if you dig deep on how the chipsets are made, how the materials are put together, how the whole package is rendered and then sold to market at the price that it's sold at, it essentially involves child labor and exploitation of the highest order. But I think if you just say evil bad and leave it at that and walk away, you've now robbed these people who, maybe they didn't even have a choice. They didn't even have a say in what happened to them, and they have been exploited, and they have been taken advantage of, and we should be against that, and we should be seeking solutions to that. I think, developing things like AI is part of the process of seeking solutions to that, but don't rob these people of the fact that their exploitation has benefited millions of people. Like, they deserve that praise. They don't deserve to be exploited, and they shouldn't be exploited, but they absolutely deserve the praise of us recognizing that the evil that was done to them has been turned into a good thing for other people. Doesn't justify the evil. Please don't hear that. It's not what I'm trying to express, but they deserve that praise that is owed to them. Whether they wanted it or not is another discussion, but it is still owed to them. And so likewise to artists who have been exploited to develop these AI models, like, they are owed that praise that their good work and their hard work is now benefiting many people. That doesn't make exploiting them okay, but they are still owed that praise. So I don't know, that was a weird point to make, perhaps, and perhaps poorly made. And for the past half hour, I've gotten nothing done with editing, and I haven't actually started putting this chapter together, which is really what I need to be doing. But it did help me to sort of process some of this idea about AI art, I guess. Anyway, until the next time.